there, my name is Pam, and if you're a dungeon master or D&D player looking to level up your D&D crafting prop making game, then I have a compilation video just for you. In this compilation series, I have included things like spell books, dice trays, potion bottles, amulets, aging paper, and so much more. It is 2 hours jam-packed full of D&D props and crafts that I have selected just for you. Without any further preamble, let's get to crafting. Welcome to my basement. Hey there, need a cool scroll prop for your next D&D or LARPing session? Or just as cool room decor? Well, look no further, have I got a video for you. Check this out. I'm going to show you how to make these easy DIY scroll props so you can use them for whatever you want. Let's get into it. The first scroll we are going to make is ridiculously easy. Take a sheet of ancient paper. If you don't happen to have any lying around, don't worry. You can make some by watching this video here, which I will link in the cards and at the end of this video. You will also need a length of twine or ribbon depending on the look you are going for. Then it's as easy as rolling up the ancient paper, wrapping the twine around the paper roll, or dare I say scroll, and tying it off. Now go ahead and make a bunch of these because they are stupidly easy. Seriously, go on now, decorate your room with scrolls. I'll wait. For the second scroll, take a piece of 3/4 inch doweling. I use 3/4 inch because that's what I had left over from my lightsaber build. Measure the doweling to the width of your ancient paper. Mine was 8.5 inches. Then break the doweling at that point because you're strong like a bear in the forest. If you're lacking in that department, you can also use a saw. Next, you're going to find some old dresser knobs that keep falling off your dresser. Then check the length of screws that come with the knobs before magicking holes into both ends of the doweling. If you don't possess magical abilities, you can also use a drill. Make the hole large enough for the end of the screw. Now take an acrylic paint color of your choice. It is wise, however, to pick one that coordinates well with the knobs you procured. I chose black. Paint the doweling with a couple of coats of paint. You can speed up the drying time with a heat gun. I would also recommend removing or sanding off any stickers prior to starting this step. I like to keep things interesting, however, and did that like halfway through. I don't know why, I just was lazy, okay? Once the paint is dry, you can squirt a dollop of hot glue into one of the end holes and then quickly force the knob with screw attached into the hole, while you pray to the craft gods that your glue doesn't harden before it's in place. Once the glue dries a little, you can go ahead and tighten the knob onto the doweling. To ensure you can do this step, prep the screws in the knobs by tightening them most but not all the way, and also dry fitting the knobs and doweling to ensure the holes you magicked are deep enough. I sprayed the painted doweling with acrylic sealer, but this step is completely unnecessary and quite frankly probably useless because we're going to cover it in paper anyway. And now you have a scroll rod. Cool, let's make some more. Take another piece of 3/4 inch doweling and cut it to 1.5 inches larger than the width of your ancient paper. Mine I cut to around 10 inches. Sand the ends to remove any imperfections left by the saw or user error. Then grab your paints. Choose whatever color suits your fancy. I picked a couple of shades of brown and a gold. Paint your rod to look like a fancier piece of wood, like something found in an ancient library. And if you feel like your rod doesn't need any embellishment, then you can forego the painting step. Awesome, now we have 2 scroll rods. So I tried a new thing for this video. I mean, it's all new, but I wanted to make scroll rod ends out of foam, and I failed. Perhaps if you're more talented than me, you can make this work, but I ultimately decided this was too much effort at this time. So instead of filling my basement with foam dust, I decided to rummage through some odds and ends my dad gave me from his shop. And I hit the jackpot! Thanks, Dad! I'm not exactly sure what these originally were, but they are now going to become scroll ends. Remember, craft friends, someone else's junk is your treasure. Okay, so once you've pilfered some old knobs from somewhere, cut another piece of doweling to the width of your ancient paper. Grab some smaller doweling or dowel pins. I used some craft doweling and cut a couple of pieces to 1.5 inches in length to create dowel pins. Then magic or drill holes into the ends of the 3/4 inch doweling and old knobs. Once that's done and your magic is spent for the day, grab your glue gun or wood glue and glue the dowel pins into the 3/4 inch scroll rod. Then attach the old knobs the same way. Cool! Then scroll your phone for inspiration or procrastination. Then prime the rod. Or not. I did only because the wooden knobs I found had paint on them. I could have easily sanded them, but to be honest, I wasn't feeling the best, and I didn't want to. Anyway, enough about me. Slap some more acrylic paint on the scroll rod, same as before. Now look at that! You have 3 rods to play with. Well, these are fun to joke about. I think we need to make the actual scrolls now. I used some rubber cement, aka contact cement, and glued a sheet of ancient paper to the scroll rod. Then I added as many more sheets as I wanted, either by gluing the ends together with contact cement or just with a glue stick. Then roll the paper onto the scroll rods. You can prevent the scrolls from unraveling by tying some fancy rope or twine around them. If you're cooler than me and happen to have some wax and a stamp, you could seal them that way as well. And just like that, you have your very own scroll props to use for D&D, LARPing, or just as cool room decor. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you so much if you made it this far. If you didn't, try harder next time. My name is Pam, and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Until next time, bye!
Nitro. Hey. Are you a bad boy? Did you chew on something you weren't supposed to? Did you put teeth marks in something I was gonna use? Goodbye, Nitro.
Recently I was experimenting with polymer clay and decided to make some fantasy amulets to not only expand my own crafting skills, but to inspire you to get your hands dirty and try something like this for yourself. I didn't really have a specific design chosen before starting this build. I had limited experience with polymer clay at the time, so I had no idea how any of these would turn out. As you can see, I was so unsure of myself that I made 3 amulets before I even pressed record. So don't ever feel like you can't make something, because I feel like that all of the time. I started by just playing with the clay and seeing how it would form shapes by molding it with my hands. The last time I played with any kind of clay, my kids were little and I never tried to really make anything. But I got really good at making snakes or worms. Meanwhile, my kids were crafting people and animals. Their imagination wasn't hindered by adult-imposed restrictions like self-doubt or imposter syndrome. So to help myself move past this, I gave myself permission to make snakes and let my imagination take me where it wanted to go. I quickly learned the clay was finicky and it needed to be warmed up substantially in my hands before I could shape it. I learned to take my time and not rush the process. Quick tip, if you're really struggling to think of something to make, have a design printed out nearby to follow for inspiration. Next time I would definitely have a clear path for my design, but for this time it was fun to see where my creativity would take me. Without constraints, this is a fun activity to challenge yourself and to see what you come up with. Ironically, I did end up making a snake. I also made a leaf, thinking elven style amulet. I figured out how to roll the clay to make a flower, so of course I had to include that into a design. I twisted one of my snakes into something that I thought would look like iron once it was painted and added some tiny skulls to it. What my imagination thought were skulls. I also made one of the amulets to look like carved bone with rune etchings scratched into the surface. These are just some of the designs that I initially came up with. I personally struggled with my crafting confidence on this one, and to be honest, I wasn't even going to post this video. I didn't think that my amulets were good enough. So take it from me, if you're just starting out, the best thing that you can do to remove any crafting block is to just try it. You might surprise yourself. After you've made your amulets, the next step is to bake them as per the package instructions. And then paint them. To me, this is the fun part. Where the thing that you've molded that kind of looks like the thing that you envisioned in your head actually looks like the thing you've envisioned in your head.
He looks like a snake.
Identifiable is good.
I thought it would be fun at this point to add resin to a couple of the pieces, to add some mysticism, especially to the amulet with the tiny skulls. I had also considered this when I was molding the amulets at the beginning, so I did have this idea as I was working through the molding process. I felt that some tinted resin could add to their appearance, to create a magical swirling vortex look in the center. I also used some of the resin as an adhesive to adhere the snake to an empty pendant that I had. I also filled some of my resin molds with some of the remaining resin. Waste not, want not. I used hot glue around the outside edge of the amulets to prevent seepage of the resin from under the sides of the amulets. This was successful, but also not at the same time. While the hot glue prevented any seepage, when I went to remove the hot glue from around the edge, it pulled off some of the paint. And I also had to heat up the hot glue in some cases to remove it, which didn't do anything to the clay because it hardens with heat, but definitely made the resin more pliable, so I had to be careful during this process. In the end, it worked out, and I just had to touch up some of the paint afterwards. Once everything was set, I also demolded the resin gems and thought they would make some nifty amulets, so I wrapped them with wire. Thinking, if I were an adventurer, how would I turn a magic stone into an amulet to wear? I then added chains or cordage to the rest of the amulets. I designed the amulets to have loops in order to make them into necklaces. And now I have some interesting fantasy amulets to wear for cosplay or use as props. I hope you try this for yourself to elevate your next D&D session or LARP session or cosplay. I definitely think that I would try this again, but maybe with a specific design in mind. Thanks for watching. My name is Pam and this is Fred. And this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Until next time. Hey there! I'm going to show you how I made a D&D spellbook prop that also doubles as a real notebook. Like this one. And as an added challenge, I'm going to mainly use supplies I procured from the dollar store so I don't break the bank. The supplies you will need from the dollar store, here in Canada I went to Dollarama, are a 9x12 inch spiral bound notebook with hard covers, one of these craft paper pads or some black cardstock, a few packages of these synthetic leather squares to get enough of one color, some white PVA glue. I didn't actually buy glue from the dollar store because I have lots, like way too much. You also need some linen or waxed thread. I started this crafting adventure by removing all the paper from the sketchbook. I started tearing the paper out and quickly decided a full disassembly was needed and would be easier. And keep the covers because we'll be using those later. Then cleaned up the paper by tearing off the edges. I folded 3 sheets of paper at a time in half to make signatures for the book. I found with this paper that 4 sheets was too much and 3 was just right. After folding all of the sheets, I stacked the signatures under some weights to press them into shape. Then I sewed the text blocks using link stitch. I marked 6 holes across one of the signatures with a pencil, and then transferred those marks to the rest of the signatures using a straight edge. I waxed some linen thread. I threaded the needle and doubled the thread, tying a knot at the end. Start from the middle of the first signature in the pile. You just want to make sure you grab the signatures in order so the holes line up. From left to right, we'll number these holes 1 to 6. Sew in and out of the 6 holes and back to the first hole. And then sew out of the first hole again. Pick up the next signature in order, then sew into the first hole. Sew out the second hole and sew under the outside threads in the last signature. This creates the link in link stitch. Then sew into the third hole. Sew out of the fourth hole and under the threads on the last signature. Sew into the fifth hole, then out the sixth hole. Tie a kettle stitch at the end of the row. You do this by sewing under the threads between the last 2 signatures and tying a knot. Then sew into the sixth hole of the next signature. When you sew out the fifth hole, sew under the threads of the last signature again. Sew back into the fourth hole and out the third hole. Then sew under the threads of the last signature and back into the second hole. When you sew out the first hole, make another kettle stitch before continuing the same stitching with the next signature. Continue sewing across each new signature, linking the new signatures by sewing under the stitches between the second and third holes and the fourth and fifth holes of the previous signatures. Making sure to tie a kettle stitch at the end before joining a new signature. When I finished sewing the text block, I rounded the spine before applying the first coat of glue. This was easy for me to do, I think, because my stitches weren't too tight. In a bit, I'll be wishing I used a different stitch for the spine, but we'll get to that later. No point crying over spilt milk or crafting mishaps, even if you want to. So I didn't think to buy some ribbon from the dollar store, so I made one by sticking 2 pieces of thin washi tape together. And yes, the washi tape was purchased from the dollar store at one point, so it counts. I then glued the bookmark to the spine and reinforced the spine with some mull, which was not from the dollar store, so that one's on me. You could use a piece of paper here instead, or another thin piece of material. Then I cut the front and back covers down to size for the book from one of the covers I removed earlier. I then marveled at my own lack of foresight. Had I used some jute, basically thick twine, I could have glued the cover boards to that. But I didn't. So I decided to cut a piece of cardstock from the craft paper pad I bought to act as an attachment point for the covers. I cut a strip of cardstock and glued it to the spine, leaving enough paper on the front and back to glue on the cover boards. This worked, but it wasn't perfect. I then glued on the cover boards and left the almost book under a board and some dinosaurs to dry. Dinosaurs are great weights, by the way. I decided to use the faux leather or synthetic leather squares I bought for the cover material. However, the squares were a tad bit tiny. So I selected the colors I liked and sewed them together to make a larger piece of material. I sewed 2 panels of black together for the front and 2 for the back. I then cut a piece of red in half-ish and sewed the red together. I then sewed the red to the front and back panels. At one point I sewed the material together the wrong way, and I was glad I left enough that I could cut off the stitch edge and start over. There may have been some curse words uttered at this point. To add a bit of spice, I sewed a jagged row along the middle seam to make the piece appear hand-sewn. While I was pretty happy with the result and how badass I was for making a bigger piece of material out of basically scraps, I felt the cover lacked something sinister. So I popped onto the internet and I found just the thing. And it worked with my color scheme too. Fancy. I printed off the Asmodeus symbol and glued it to the back of a piece of red leather with a glue stick. Then cut out the design with a pair of scissors. I then used some more glue to tack the design to the cover. Then I hand stitched around the whole thing to create that evil handmade look. as if a not-so-good wizard in a dark tower really wanted to design her own spellbook, but didn't know how to sew. That's me. I'm that wizard. Then I procrastinated for a bit because the next part always stresses me out. I glued on the spine of the book to the cover material first and let that dry before moving on to the covers. I then glued the covers on and let them dry for a bit under a weight. Then I trimmed the edges and cut the corners, cut some angle cuts at the spine of the book as well. I then glued down the edges to the inside covers. I left this section to dry for a bit again before moving on. I am not a professional, so please don't use my methods as bookbinding gospel. It's just my quirky little way I do things. Then I used 2 pieces of cardstock from the craft pad for the end sheets. The paper wasn't quite long enough and I always have trouble with this part. It's finicky. So finicky. I kind of low-key hates it. I glued down the end sheets first to the last page on either end, and then slowly to the inside covers so I don't mess it up. Like I said, they are too short, but since I was trying to only use the dollar store supplies, I couldn't substitute them. It won't be perfect, but the not-so-evil wizard doesn't mind, because it's what she puts in it that matters. Some blood, a little sweat, and lots of tears. Or was that the other way around? Perhaps a little more blood. If you'd prefer scrolls to write your spells in, watch this video next. Thanks for watching. My name is Pam, and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Until next time, toodles! We all know how frustrating it is if you're playing a board game or a TTRPG and your dice roll off the table onto the floor and then you have to bend down and pick them up with all the dust and the crumbs and everything. An obvious solution might be to purchase a dice rolling tray. I've priced some of these, they can get quite expensive. Or you could just use an old shoebox or something to keep your dice contained. But let's be honest, that really doesn't match the decor we're going for. Well, I have a solution for you. I went to the dollar store and I bought one of these wooden canvas frames for about $2.50. That's Canadian. And we're going to make a dice rolling tray from this frame. All you will need for this project is the frame, some sandpaper, some glue, acrylic paint, tissue paper, more glue, felt, googly eyes, oh, and some more glue. When I removed the frame from the packaging, I did notice some imperfections in the wood. I sanded these down and rounded the edges, but let's be honest, it's from the dollar store, it's not going to be perfect, but I just wanted to clean it up a little bit. I then wiped the dust off before painting the whole thing in an acrylic black paint. This step was probably completely unnecessary, but at least now it looks like something new. Like a dice rolling tray, perhaps. I did want to create a bit of a leather look without covering the whole thing in leather or vinyl, so I decided to use the tissue paper technique that I've used on some book covers in previous videos. And I'll link those so you can watch those later if you want. Basically, all you're going to do is take your tissue paper, just simple gift wrap tissue paper. You need 1 sheet for this. You're going to crumple it up ahead of time and set it aside. Then you're going to cover one section of it in a layer of glue. You're going to unravel your tissue paper, press the paper down on top of the tray. Then you're going to take a sponge or a brush and a bunch more white PVA glue, and you're going to dab that all over the top of the tissue paper. Then you're going to repeat this step for the sides and the top and that inner section. You're going to want the back to dry completely before you move on to the sides and top. This will take a little while for it to dry, so just be patient with that. And you may need to get creative with how you're applying the paper. You might want to cut some off before doing this. I ended up cutting excess paper away and applying more later on over areas that I had missed. As long as your edges are flush when you're done, you shouldn't notice the patchwork at all. Once the tissue paper glued area is completely dry, you're going to want to prime it for painting. I used a gesso that dries clear to prime the tissue paper. Then, starting with the back, I applied a couple layers of brown acrylic paint. I was running low of the one shade, so I had to use 2 different shades and brands. Remind me to buy more acrylic paint. Acrylic paint can also be purchased at the dollar store, so we can save our pennies for more crafts. I did end up applying a watered down layer of one of the brown acrylic paints because I like that look a little bit better. I think initially when I painted it down, I was seeing the black paint I had applied on, so it wasn't completely useless. And it did give it this really cool shading look, but then I ended up covering it up and then going back over it again with the other brown because I liked it better. And then I went over the whole thing with a black wash. Washes are amazing. They just sort of are magical and add a certain depth to the layers and shadowing that you wouldn't have had otherwise. All you have to do is throw some acrylic paint in water and mix it up so it's really super watery. And then you brush some of that on and dab off the excess. Honestly, I was so surprised with how the back turned out. I kind of really love it. It looks like leather. It's so crazy. Then I repeated the exact same steps on the sides, tops, and inner section to create the exact same look because I like the back so much. I didn't want to do anything a little bit different and not have that look that I achieved on the back. I think this is one of the best parts because it starts to look like something other than a box with glue and tissue paper on it. Once the paint was dry, I chose a felt to cover the bottom of the tray. I went with sort of a pirate black shade rather than the gothic black that I had used earlier when I painted the whole thing. I cut the felt down to size and used some PVA glue to glue it to the bottom of the tray. If you wanted, you could finish here, or you could be like me and make some fake rivets out of googly eyes. And now I have a new crafting nemesis, googly eyes. The googly eyes were full of static and they just stuck to my hands. Even when I thought I had them all put away, I was finding more googly eyes. They're just on my fingers someplace, attacking me like some D-rated horror movie where you're attacked by plastic eyeballs. You may think I'm a little bit crazy, but have you seen this gif? So I used some washi tape to keep them in line. Take that, googly eyes. Then I primed them all with gesso and painted them with a variety of metallic paints until I was happy they no longer resembled googly eyes. After some deliberation on where I should place the embellishments, I decided to put them on the sides, so I measured the sides of the tray and just marked with pencil where the center was and approximately 2 inches out from the center, just so they kind of looked equal around the sides. Then I glued them on with some craft glue. Due to the nature of acrylic paint, I wanted to add some protection to the bottom of the tray, so I cut out some felt and glued it onto the bottom of the tray to prevent wearing of the paint. Which I still haven't done yet, so I should do that. Even though I've written in here like I've done it, but I haven't done it yet. Oh look! I did it! Yay! Go me! And thus we have finished a dice rolling tray that looks marginally better than a cardboard box, and will assuredly prevent any dice being lost to the void that is your floor. If you think that this tray might be a little too small for you, just buy a larger wooden frame and make a bigger one. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Pam and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want another dollar store D&D related craft, watch this video next. Until next time, bye! Hey guys, have you ever wanted to add a little pizzazz to your next D&D or LARPing adventure? Well, today I'm going to show you how you can level up your next adventure by making ancient map scroll props for your next campaign. First things first is you're going to find a large piece of paper. I used a large piece of paper that I had purchased previously for bookbinding and I hadn't used it yet, so I thought it would be really good to use for this purpose. I thought of maybe using Bristol board, but I found maybe that the paper for a Bristol board would be too thick and it wouldn't roll up nice enough. So you're going to take your large piece of paper and you're going to cut or tear it in half, or leave it large if you prefer, if that's the size that you're looking for. You can make this map pretty much any size that you want. it's up to you. I would recommend creating a sketch ahead of time just so you know what your map is going to look like. I pulled out an old D&D book and kind of looked at some of the maps in there. Decided to base mine off of a map that I had created for a previous book I was writing that never saw the light of day. But hey, I kept it around and it's going to work perfectly for this project. World creation is one of my hobbies. Once you're satisfied with your sketch, you can transfer that image to a larger piece of paper that you're going to be using for your map. If you're a better artist than me, you could probably just start with the larger piece of paper, but I needed to sketch mine out first so I knew exactly what I was putting on the larger piece of paper, so I didn't ruin it by erasing things 50 million times. To make my maps more visible, I went over the lines again with some fine tip pens. You could probably get away with just going over the lines again with a heavier pencil line. You just want to make sure that your lines are going to be visible after the next step. Next, we're going to get a little bit messy by artificially aging our paper. So now you need to make some coffee or tea. If you're like us and you drink coffee in the morning, you could just use what's left over in the pot. That's all I did. Apparently we didn't need much caffeine this day because there was a lot left over for me to use. Score! All you want to do is make sure if you're making your coffee or using what you have already made for that day, it has cooled down enough for you to use so you don't burn yourself. This does get a little bit messy, so you're going to want to find a pan that's large enough for your paper to sit in so you don't get coffee all over your table or counter that you're working on. I used a large cookie sheet that I already had on hand. It was pretty much almost the size of my paper. It was just a little bit smaller, but it still worked. You're going to want to spread your coffee over the paper with a brush or sponge. The brush did work. You kind of might get some brush lines. If that's the look you're going for, have at it. I ended up using a sponge for mine. I found the application was a bit easier and it had more of an even spread of the coffee over the paper. And I did apply the coffee to both sides of the paper. Use some paper towel or a towel to mop up any excess coffee that you have. You want to try to get the paper not dry, but just not soaking wet and sitting in fluid when you put it in the oven. So you're going to preheat your oven to 200 degrees and you're going to pop your paper and pan into the oven. Be careful because any sort of markings that you have on your pan will show up on the paper. I discovered this when I was aging paper in a previous video, and I'll link that in the cards if you want to check it out. I fixed this problem by putting some parchment paper or wax paper underneath the sheet. Note though that if you do use a parchment or a wax paper under the paper when it goes into the oven, it takes a little bit longer to dry. My paper took about 4 minutes to dry in the oven. You will want to check the paper periodically depending on the size of your paper and how wet it was going in and how hot your oven is. Your drying time may be less or more than what mine was. Mine I found at 200 degrees for the size of paper I was using. 4 minutes was absolutely perfect. Any less than that and it was still a little bit damp when it came out. Now you're going to remove the paper once it's dry and you're going to repeat the steps for as many maps as you want. I only had one pan this size and I was making a couple of these maps. I did have to make sure that my pan had cooled down enough for me to use again for my second piece of paper. I also wanted a darker shade of discoloration on my sheet, so I did apply a second coat of coffee to my paper. It did make it a little bit darker. I kind of also had a few spots in the pages that were still a little bit too light, so I made sure to go over those places that had been, I guess, resistant to the stain previously. And I didn't go over the whole sheet with the coffee again. I sort of did it in like sweeps so that one side of the page was a little bit darker than the other side to give it that more natural yet artificial aged look. That's just what I did for mine. You could add more or less depending on what kind of look you're going for. You do you, it's your craft. So then I had the bright idea that I needed to singe the edges of my maps, and I decided the best place to do this was on top of my oven. I do not recommend doing this step inside the house. Find a well-ventilated, non-flammable area to work for this next step. Trust me, don't do this in your house. I turned on the oven fan to vent the smoke and everything, but I ended up having to open up the windows because my house ended up reeking like burnt coffee and charcoal. To singe the edges, you just want to go over the edges of the paper a little bit with the lighter until it kind of catches fire, and then you're going to want to immediately put it out. Unless you want a big burn spot in your map, be careful with this. I had one area that caught on fire really well, and I had a little bit of trouble putting it out. It does make it look really cool, but again, It wasn't the look I was going for at the time. And again, I was in my house burning things, so probably not the brightest idea, but hey, no accidents today. Now that your maps are pretty much done, you're going to want to find yourself some doweling for the next step. The doweling I used was 3/4 inches in diameter. Take your doweling and mark how big you want it to be. I cut mine so it was about an inch larger than my map on either side. So my map, when I measured it on my cutting mat, was around 15 inches wide, so I cut my doweling to 17 inches. You're going to want 2 pieces for each map. Once you have your dowels cut, you're going to want to sand the ends down so they are less rough and a little more smooth to touch. Now you can leave your dowels au naturel, or you can paint them like I did. If you're a painter like me, you're going to use some acrylic paint in whatever shade suits your fancy. I would imagine that you could probably just spray these suckers with spray paint as well. I painted a base coat in a shade of brown, and then I dry brushed over top to create that faux natural wood look. With the scroll rods complete, now you can glue them to the edges of your maps. I used some Beacon Advanced Craft Glue for this. It is sort of a faster drying glue, it's clear, and it's non-acidic. But I definitely felt that hot glue would 100% work, or a wood glue or another kind of PVA glue. You're going to want to make sure that your glue is set. You may need to help the glue along by pressing the doweling down firmly onto the paper for a period of time until it holds, and smoothing down the edge of the paper along the doweling as well, just so that it's adhered nicely to the side. Now all you're left to do is struggle to roll up your scrolls, wishing that you had a third hand for this. You're going to want to find something that you can tie your scrolls together with so they don't unravel as fast as your patience. I used some jute and tied it in a knot around the scrolls. And now you have some fancy, semi-realistic map scrolls for your next D&D LARPing or role-playing adventure. Thanks so much for watching. I appreciate you, especially if you got this far in the video. I really enjoy making these projects and sharing them with you. If you want to say hi in the comments, I would love to hear from you. If you want to learn how to make a few different versions of scroll props for your next adventure, watch this video next. My name is Pam, this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. If you want to have more D&D fun with me, hit that subscribe button. Until next time, stay nerdy, my friends. Hello, yes, I have returned and I can speak. Hooray! Like Ariel, I defeated the wicked laryngitis witch and got my voice back. With the help of some antibiotics, of course, a modern day potion, so to speak. A week ago, I polled my audience to see if they'd like my husband to do my voiceover until I recovered my voice. And to the surprise of us both, the majority of you said yes. While I obviously do have my voice back, we thought it would be fun to kind of stick with the poll and have Justin, my husband, do my voiceover. But since I can speak now as well, that I would pop in every now and then just to give you a little bit more information about what I'm doing, just so this video can be used as a tutorial as well. So without further ado, let's get into it.
Pam ordered a number of small glass bottles from online. Here they are, pre-labeled, but we're going to remove those labels. She's got some Goo Gone here. That's some pretty handy stuff. So we're going to spritz up some onto these bottles. Hopefully we'll scrape the labels right off. Looks like we're struggling a little bit maybe. Oh, get it out with the tools. Yeah, scrape them off. Make sure you protect your hands. You don't want to get that stuff into your skin. Definitely not in your eyes. Protect yourselves. Oh man, they even put labels on the bottom? Wow, rough.
I didn't buy them online. I got them at the dollar store. Yeah, dollar store is your friend for some pretty neat, cool stuff. So check around Halloween time and you might find something like I used for this project. Otherwise, go in and see what they have from day to day. They might surprise you. Look for these little jars that have shells in them. Similarly, corked top, you could use something like that. You can use swing top bottles. They also sell those. And our dollar store is a Dollarama. That's where I purchased these. So yeah, great resource. These ones were just from Halloween.
Baby oil. We're going to start off with some baby oil and some water. We're going to mix these together, I think. That's what it looks. Oh, we got glitter. Uh-oh. 0 days glitter free. Some neon food coloring. All right, so baby oil, some water, some glitter, and some food coloring. Let's see what goes on. Looks like about half a bottle of the baby oil, some of this red food dye, food coloring, food dye, a few drops. That stuff goes a long way. Just, I guess, continue to add stuff until you're happy. There we go. That looks like it actually gets some real color to it. Oh, now we get some dark magenta, purple, one of the two. And now we're gonna mix up with some water. Looks like we're gonna top off the rest of the bottle. She's got a funnel there to make this a lot easier. Don't just try to dump it into the neck. That's a great way to make a great mess of your workspace. We can see now that the oil is sitting on top of the water. That's kind of neat. Remember to cap it off before you try and shake it. Ooh, look at it sparkle. Swirly. And fancy.
This first potion was made with water, baby oil, food coloring, just a couple of drops, and some glitter. Although I think I had to use a couple more than a couple drops to get the color correct. The ratio for this is 1:1, so fill half of your bottle with baby oil, add your food coloring, add your glitter, put your water on top, shake it all up. Your baby oil and food coloring separate, which is kind of fun. It doesn't give you that lovely mixed look if that's what you're going for, but it's still fun and it's safe for kids. So this is a great project for the little ones if you got some at home who want to help with the Halloween decorations or just helping your area have more of that fantasy aesthetic.
Pam is never going to get that glitter out of her workspace. Oh, look at the color of this one with glycerin. So here we have some glycerin. Let's say 1 cup of glycerin, more water, and some more of that food coloring. Mica powder. That's going to be really shiny. She's starting with water this time. Looks like about half full. Ooh, blue mica powder. And I guess blue food dye this time. That looks like it went way further than the red stuff. A couple of scoops of them. Oh yeah, definitely. She's gonna be getting this stuff out of the workspace forever. But look at it. Look at the shine on that stuff. That's really cool. Now we're mixing in the glycerin. No funnel this time. Good luck. Flawless. What a pro. Never doubted it. Now we're going to put the cap on, shake it all up. Look at the shine on that. That's some really deep color in that one. Very nice. Very nice. Swirly. Ooh. Don't drink this. This one sounds fun. Adult potion? Oh, I see. Well, that looks like isopropyl alcohol. And some water. Some more food dye. And more mica powder. What color are we doing this time? Start with some water. I think she's doing a 50-50 mix for all of these. That seems to be sort of par for the course. Oh, we're going to do, looks like purple food dye this time. And maybe some red mica powder. Yeah, look at that. Maybe it's purple. Maybe the light from the camera makes this difficult to see. Mix it all up. Oh, you can already see the shine. Look at that. And top it up with your isopropyl alcohol. Oh, you can see the glitter in the mat. It's never coming out. Ooh, look at that. That's pretty cool. I like the look of that. Very nice, very nice.
So potions number 2 and 3 are basically the same. You fill them with a portion of water, you add your food coloring and your mica, and then you top with either glycerin or alcohol. and then you shake them up. If you're using glycerin for these, you're going to want to fill it with 2/3 of water and then 1/3 of the glycerin. If you're using alcohol, like an isopropyl alcohol, I use 70%, not the kind that you drink. You're going to want to fill it up 3/4 of the way with water, and 1/4 of your ratio will be the alcohol. So the only thing with these potions and these bottles that I'm finding, and this one was just doing it for me because they're cheap dollar store bottles, I might find a way to seal the top of this because it was leaking. The mica powder has a tendency to settle at the bottom as well, so while they do look really pretty and give you that fun swirling effect that everyone sees online all the time, which was the reason I did this video, the mica settles at the bottom. So if they've just been sitting for a little while and you come back to them, it will be settled. So you do have to kind of give them a little shake to get them going again. And that's where I found that this leaking around the top. You could probably seal it with some hot glue or something if you didn't want to actually reuse this again. But of course, you know, if you're just using it for a brief period of time, dump it out, reuse your bottle. So yeah, you can see it settled there at the bottom, but you get a little shake. I also added probably way too much mica powder in this red one because I was trying to get more of a healing potion look. These ones are my favorite because they had more of that mystical potion vibe that I was going for.
Not your mama's health potion. I was not prepared for these names. Cotton balls. Lots of cotton balls and water. And more glitter. More food dye. Start off with the water. I guess we gave up on the funnel. She's a pro. Look at her go. Looks like red food dye this time. I don't think she's as shy now that she's done it a couple times. We're going to mix that glitter right in there. I'm not sure what these cotton balls are doing. Like, do these go in there? I think they go in there. Oh, okay. Yeah, we're just going to jam them in there. This is going to be one thick potion. It's like 2, 3, 4 maybe cotton balls. Maybe 4 cotton balls. Some more glitter. Some more food coloring. In they go. Mix it well. And a bunch of water. More cotton balls. Rip them up. Jam them in there. I'm not sure if we're at 5 or if that's a different cut and we're now at 6. Or is this 6? I don't know. I can't tell. We'll never know. We'll never know. Looks like she's just adding them until she's happy. More food coloring. Mix it all up. Work it in there. What is this? 7, 8 cotton balls now? This potion is looking really thick. Like, you'd have to chew this one to get it down. Not that you'd want to chew on cotton balls, you know. What do you at? 9, 8 cotton balls now? I don't even know. Nobody knows. She might have to put some text on the screen here. 10? Is that 10? Or is that the same one just from 2 different angles? Movie magic. Get some more glitter in there to brighten it up. Some more food coloring. And then we're going to top it off with some water. Okay. I would have totally slopped at least one of these pours all over my desktop by now. Yet another cotton ball. Oh, we're going for more. What are we at? 11, 12? Were we at 10? 8? I don't know. Now we're going to shake it up. Oh, yeah, you might need to chase that one with something to wash it down.
This last potion is made with water, food coloring, glitter, and cotton balls. you will need a lot of cotton balls. Way more than the 10 Justin thought I used for this. I didn't count them. There were a lot. Basically, you add in a little bit of water, your food coloring, and your glitter, and you pull apart the cotton balls and stuff them in and let the cotton balls soak up the fluid. When you're happy with that amount, you repeat those steps until your bottle is full and you're happy with the look. This one creeped me out maybe the most when I was making it, and I'm not sure why. It just had that look of blood or meat or something, especially when it was just filled up at the bottom a little bit. And I feel like that has a lot to do with the color I chose, and maybe that's just me, but yeah, it still looks pretty cool. And also another fun one for the kiddos. I may have put too many cotton balls in this. I'm not entirely sure, but it still looks pretty cool. And honestly, for one that's going to look the same on your shelf, it's probably going to be this one. And, you know, your baby oil water mix as well isn't going to settle as much. But it does have that cool wave look. Like this one's really mesmerizing on the inside there. You know, the glitter stuck in the top liquid. It will remain separated because oil and water do not mix. So that one's pretty cool too.
Okay, now we're gonna decorate them further. We get some craft paper. Oh, this is a cry-cut stencil cutter, I think. I think that's what that is. Yes, cutting stencils. You may not know it, but in her spare time away from her other spare time, she does scrapbooking. Oh, that's cool. Alright, yeah, we got some labels cut out. Got some stamps. Gonna get some color on there. Oh, I think she's weathering them. Yeah, we're weathering the stamps. Weathering the labels. We are weathering labels. Oh, that's a corner cutter. Look at that. Sizing everything up. Looks like we're gonna weather up another one. Sorry, I don't know the names of all of those tools or necessarily the technique she's using.
So the machine I used to cut out the tags, or some of the tags, is called a Cricut. There's different brands of this. It's a die cutting machine. This just happens to be a manual one. So like the Cricut Maker or something, it's just a manual crank one. It will open up and suction to your table, and then you buy these metal dies separately, and then you sandwich them between plates, and then they go through, you run them through the press, is basically a press, and then the dies cut out the paper. It's fun. But you can buy pre-cut tags at the dollar store, so don't feel like you need to buy any special tools for this at all. Some of the tags I used actually are just pre-cut tags. They come in a little baggie with some twine, so you can use the twine as well for around the top of the bottle. So you don't even need to buy twine separately. You could just get a bag of those tags and use the supplies inside of it. Also for the weathering, don't feel like you need to use any kind of special ink like I did. Use some Tim Holtz distressed ink for this. Paint would work just fine.
Oh, now we're painting corks. We're gonna paint up some corks. So I think they were just like plain black corks. And I think we're gonna make them look more like natural corks with some color. That's a little better. Looks less synthetic. Now we're gonna hand write labels. I think that's glue? Some kind of glue? I think we're gluing. Gonna do a glue up. Yeah, definitely glue. Oh, thumbprint. Just a little bit of extra weathering, I think. Make it look a little bit worn. We got some twine rope. Or thick twine. I don't know what the proper term is. Hot glue. We're gonna hot glue the twine to the bottle. Just to add some more decoration around the neck. Looks like she's got it wrapped around there a few times until she's happy, then snip off the rest. I'm probably gonna glue that piece down too. Yeah, there we go. Don't burn yourselves. She's got that nice silicone pad that the glue gun goes on so that it doesn't damage her craft mat. I should have thought of that ages ago, because, wow, mine's a mess. Looks like we get some thinner twine here for this blue potion. Wrap it around a whole bunch of times until you're happy. Then, I don't know, yeah, more glue. More glue to tie it all down. Well, looks like we're gonna tie on some labels now. Got a little hole punch so we can get the twine through. Oh, double wrap so it doesn't slip around. And then it looks like we're tying a knot to secure the tag, and we're going to trim off the excess. Leave a tasteful amount. Oh, we're going to weather it, fray it a little bit, tastefully. Yeah, weather it up. Alright, here's our potions. I think one says Potion of Life, Mana, and yeah. And that's all, folks.
I hope you enjoyed this foray into potion making and that you try some of these for yourself. I'm happy to be back. Honestly and truthfully, I really wasn't sure if I was going to be back because I've had a change in job status and I would be working a lot more. But I can't quit you, so here I am. As far as channel direction goes, as some of you may know, my husband and I have started another channel called Monster Lore where we talk about monsters from mythology and movies, and it's been a lot of fun. We really want to dress up our set, so this whole area, to look sort of like a monster hunter's study. Originally, we wanted to go with something a little bit more like what we do in the shadows, like that kind of Victorian era vampire look. But I think it would be really fun to transform this area into some sort of mystical monster hunter study filled with old tomes and oddities and trinkets and scrolls and potions. And I thought I would share that journey here on Total Pamerky. I have a whole bunch of ideas for spooky fantasy study set pieces, and I can't wait to share them with you. If that's something you're interested in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what I'm going to make next. As always, thank you so much for watching. My name is Pam, and this has been Total Pamerky, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Man, it's been a while since I said that. Until next time, bye! Hey there! Let's have some fun aging some paper without waiting a century. For this craft, that is super easy and will in no way leave your house smelling like burnt coffee, this is what you're gonna need. An oven-proof pan like a cookie sheet, parchment paper, measuring cups, foam brushes or a sponge, paper towel, a heat gun, dryer or oven, and of course paper, I use 24-pound paper, coffee and or tea, and fire. I began this little paper aging experiment by boiling some water. I then combined 1 tablespoon of instant coffee with 1 cup of boiling water. I also steeped a tea bag in a cup of water for 5 minutes. Meanwhile, because the coffee and tea needed to cool down, I decided it would be fun to try a couple of the other aging methods I read about. One method used lime or lemon juice and a heat gun to brown the edges of the paper. For whatever reason, I could not get this method to work for me. I even put a lime juice soaked page in the oven to no avail. I'm no expert, and while the heat gun did brown a small spot on the edge, I couldn't help but feel I either was doing something very wrong or this technique wasn't effective. I also tried lemon juice, which was equally disappointing. So I moved on to burning the paper instead. I strongly suggest you do this technique over a sink or even outside and in a very well ventilated area. Oh, and also be an adult, or have adult supervision. We are playing with fire here. While the fire did create some fun effects to the edge of the paper, I wondered if it would work better to add detail after using one of the other techniques I'll be showing you. I also read that you could crumple up some paper and bury it in soil outside for 3 to 14 days, but, maybe not. I decided that technique wasn't for me. For the next aging techniques, you'll want to preheat your oven to 200 degrees. Grab one of your pans and lay a sheet of paper on the pan. You can use parchment paper under the paper if you want. Now that our coffee is cooled down and we're not going to burn ourselves, we can have some real fun. Pour a little bit of coffee onto the paper, you don't need a whole lot, and spread it over the sheet with a foam brush or sponge. Then take some paper towel or an old towel and soak up the excess coffee. You don't want any puddles or the paper won't dry. You can also tear the edges or poke holes in the paper at this point to achieve the look you want. Or you can crumple the paper prior to staining it with the coffee. Experiment to see which effects give you the look you want. Then toss the pan and paper into the oven for around 5 minutes. Check the paper periodically. It could take around 4 to 7 minutes for the paper to dry. I also found if I used parchment paper, it took the sheet longer to dry in the oven. If you don't have access to an oven, you can also dry the paper with a heat gun or hair dryer. Or set the paper in the sun to dry. On a side note, be careful if your pan has any markings on it because it will leave a mark on the paper. I use the parchment paper to avoid leaving Betty Crocker marks all over my paper. You can crumple the paper before or after the staining and drying process, but I think it looked more natural if it was done prior to adding the stain. You can also write on the paper beforehand. However, I would be cautious because depending on what kind of ink you use, it could bleed when the liquid is applied. And yes, you can write on it after as well. At this point, I also attempted the fire technique on the coffee-stained paper. I felt this was a better use of the fire to create interesting effects on the edges of the paper. And now my house smelt like a combination of burnt paper and coffee. Wonderful. The tea stain worked the same as the coffee. Pour on the tea and spread it over the paper. However, I found the tea did not produce as dark a stain as the coffee. I even tried steeping the tea for longer, around 10 minutes. Again, using only 1 bag to 1 cup of water. And I still didn't notice much of a difference once the paper was dry. I realized at the end of my little experiment that it was easier and less messy to paint the coffee or tea stain directly onto the paper instead of pouring it on. And depending on if you painted on one or both sides, you could have one side of the paper darker than the other. I also just had fun combining the coffee and tea until I had a large stack of aged paper. But what, I wonder, could I possibly do with all this DIY ancient paper? Well, you better hit that subscribe button to find out. My name is Pam, and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Until next time, bye! Have you ever struggled to come up with unique and cool map ideas for your next D&D adventure or book? Well, look no further, I've got a fun trick for you. My name is Pam, and welcome to my craft dungeon. Today I thought it would be fun to try making maps using coffee beans. You might be asking yourself, how the heck do you make a map from coffee beans? Well, my crafty friends, let me show you. But before we do that, we need to gather some simple supplies. First, you'll need to gather some ancient paper. If you don't have any ancient paper on hand, you can use whatever boring plain paper you have lying around, or you can make some. Aging paper is as simple as taking the rest of your morning brew and dumping it on some paper. I've used some watercolor paper this time around. I have done this craft before, and I will link that video up above so you can check it out if you want, but please do that at the end of this video. To prevent giant messes, place your paper on a cookie sheet. If your cookie sheet has any markings on it, it will show up on the paper after it's dried. So if it does have markings, just put some parchment paper or something down underneath the paper that you'll be staining. Then it's super helpful to use a sponge to not only spread the coffee all over the paper, but to mop up any inevitable messes you make whilst doing this craft. Once you spread your coffee over both sides of the paper, you're going to turn your oven to 200 degrees and pop the cookie sheet and paper into the oven for 4 to 5 minutes. I found the 4-minute mark was about perfect for this, and I flipped the paper around the 2-minute mark to ensure that it was equally dried on both sides. Next, you're going to need some coffee beans. You can grow your own, of course, or you can source them locally from your grocery store. I bought Tim Hortons coffee beans because I'm authentically Canadian, or don't want to spend any money purchasing coffee beans, which I can appreciate. You could use some rice or any other kind of dried bean. I would avoid the wet ones. Now, I should mention that the beans that you need for the next part are not the same beans that you use to stain your paper. So if you did need to purchase coffee beans anyways to stain your paper with, just use the unground ones for the next part. You can also dye your paper with tea if you have that. Now comes the fun part. Place your beans into an aesthetically pleasing bowl. Just kidding. Although it does help set the mood, and it is easier to pour the beans out onto your paper because you will have a equally measured part and you're not going to be dumping the whole bag out. Now turn on some medieval studying music or tavern music if you prefer to set the mood. But seriously, do get comfy. I found this craft to be very relaxing for my overworked brain cells. Now all you're going to do is dump your beans out onto your paper. Perfect. Now resist the urge to move any of them. The magic comes from the randomness of the beans. Kind of like the randomness of your D&D character stats. And we never ever re-roll those now, do we? Now all you're going to do is trace around the beans. I used a pencil, but you could use a pen or whatever else you have on hand. Just remember that a pencil is easier to erase things. Depending on how your beans land on the map, you could end up with a single large continent or a bunch of smaller land masses or islands. The beauty of this is the randomness of it. And if you really don't like it, you could always re-roll or adjust a rogue bean here or there to your liking, kind of like your D&D character stats. Once you've traced around your beans, dump them back into the bowl to use for next time and marvel at your new map. Congratulations! You made an original map from beans. To spice up your map, add some features like mountains or volcanoes. Maybe some trees or hills. Perhaps a monster or some ruins. The choice is yours. It is your map after all. And if you're really not happy with portions of it and you desperately need that lake or river on your map, add them in later. This is easily done if you used a pencil. If you didn't use a pencil, use a pencil next time. And if you struggle to draw things like mountains or other map elements like I do, there are a lot of wonderful online examples to reference. Once you're happy with your design, you can go over your pencil marks with a black pen or a marker to make it a little bit more permanent. This craft would be fun to use as a prop for your next D&D campaign or to help you plan your next story or novel. I will be turning these maps into scrolls, so if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our next crafting adventure. And if you want to learn more about aging paper without waiting hundreds of years, watch this video next. My name is Pam, and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Until next time, bye. Coffee. This is a dice bag. Hey there, my name is Pam, and today I'm going to show you how to make a simple dice bag. Not this dice bag, of course. This bag was purchased and by the looks of it required a little bit of sewing. The bag I'm hoping to make today doesn't require any sewing and is hopefully the easiest bag to make. The materials you will need for this project are as follows. You'll need some suede, some grommets, grommet setter, some lace, hole punch, scissors, pencil, a plate, a bowl, just something round. No, not like that. Now that we have all our materials gathered, you're going to want to inspect your suede or fabric to see which section is best to cut out your bag. Open up your fabric. So we're going to just find a spot where our bowl can sit on. And that kind of like looks nice on the outside. Once you've found that area, flip your suede over to the back side and place your plate or round object that you're going to use to pattern your bag off of in that area. Then trace around it with a pencil. So all we need to do is be able to see our mark. So my circle mark. Woohoo, yay. So we're basically just going to cut out our circle as best we can. When cutting fabric, it is best to use long cuts and turn the material as you go. Short cuts will result in jagged edges around the circle. Ta-da! A relatively good circle. This is going to be a tiny bag. Whoa. Use a ruler or a straight edge for the next part. Basically, you'll want to mark equal spaced marks for the holes around the edge of your circle. With my first attempt, I only made 8 holes around the outside edge of the circle. And I realized after I'd laced it up that it wasn't enough and there was a lot of bulging of fabric out of the sides. So the ideal amount of holes that I discovered that I needed around the outside edge was about 16. No matter how many marks for holes that you have, you'll want an even number of holes. Make 16 marks around the edge, as equal distance apart as you can get them. I spaced mine so they were approximately 3/4 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric as well. When all your holes are marked, you can punch them out with your hole punch. We're gonna punch some holes. Arguably, this might be one of the best parts and a good stress reliever. Then all you need to do is thread the lace through the holes, starting from the outside to the inside, and then going in and out of the holes until you come out again. Oh yay, we did it! We did it! Ah, we did it! It's so cute! I'm a cute little bag. Let's make a bigger one.
Several days later.
Hi, we're back! Let's make a bigger one. And in order to do that, you need something that is a bigger circle basically to trace around. And you can do this one or two ways. So this one, I did use a plate for it, and the plate was a little bit too tiny because my brain did not realize that the radius of the object used, in this case my plate, would basically turn out to be the length of your sack. So I need a bigger round thing. A large mixing bowl. And the diameter of this large mixing bowl from end to end is just over 12 inches. So yeah. I'm going to use my big bowl to make a bigger sack. For this bag, we'll be using the grommets I mentioned earlier. You really don't need them for this project. If cost is an issue for you, just leave the grommets out. All they help was reinforcing the holes that you made so that they don't tear. So if that's going to be a concern for you, then definitely use them. But they're not necessary. The small bag, I ended up just leaving it without grommets in them. And it's small enough, you know, if there's nothing real heavy in it, it's probably going to be fine, especially if you're using it for a costume piece. Again, I traced around my round object on the back side of the suede. I don't know about everybody else, but I've been a little unhinged lately, and I kind of like it. And now, we cut. Ooh, she's getting better at cutting out circles. So exciting. Then divided the suede and marked 16 spots for holes around the edge, 3/4 of an inch from the outside edge of the circle. If you are using grommets for this, when you punch your holes, you're going to want to make sure that your holes are not too big for the grommets that you're using. So you can figure this out by taking your holes and your grommets and just putting one of the grommets over your hole punch and making sure it's roughly the same size. So if it's snug on your hole punch, then it's probably good. You can also test this on a scrap piece of suede before you inevitably ruin your project. So just punch holes in your suede, and if you have enough grommets, then use one to practice with first on that scrap piece of suede so you don't accidentally ruin your hard work by choosing the wrong size. Honestly, I did this because I hadn't used grommets or a grommet setter before, and I wanted to make sure I was doing it correctly before I ruined all my hard work. And you're going to punch out all your holes once more. So now we take our hammer, our little anvil grommet setter, our grommets, and all of our tiny little holes, and then we proceed to set all of these teeny tiny grommets. Hammer that looks like a cinnamon roll. Echo soft lace. Aww, that's so cute. So depending on what you want to do with your sack and what you might be storing in your sack, where you might be hanging your sack, might determine how long you want to make your lace that's in your sack, keeping your sack closed. So here's the length of the one using a 12-inch diameter. This is the one I made using, I think this one was like a 9-inch diameter because it's around 4 inches in length. The radius doesn't exactly quite equal the length of it because, you know, you're gonna account for some of this width at the bottom. So 5.5 inches long. That's some incredible shrinkage. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Pam, and this has been Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. If you enjoyed this video and would like to watch some more unhinged crafting chaos, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on the next video. Until next time, bye. Hey there, my name is Pam and I like to have adventures in crafting. Today I'm going to show you how to make this amazing dragon scale journal for all of your fantasy adventures. Materials used are listed in the video description. Let's make a dragon scale book cover. To begin, we are going to start with the covers. Take one 8.5 by 11 piece of chipboard and slice it in half. Shing! Awesome. Now you have the base for the front and back covers. Next we need to make the templates for our dragon scales. I sketched out a few ideas from individual scales to long strips of wavy lines. I decided the individual scales would be too tedious, and no one wants that, so I went with the long strips of wavy lines. When cut out and stacked just right, the wavy strips look just like scales. I got this idea from Punished Props when Bill made a dragon egg. And of course my brain immediately thought to make a notebook instead. Once you cut out some of the wavy scale templates, trace around the wavy edge on some craft foam using a pencil. Then cut the foam along the pencil line using a craft knife. You can use scissors, but the foam dulls the blade rather quickly, and I had to repeatedly sharpen the blade of my knife. You can use both sides of cut piece by slicing the upper and lower waves in half, giving you two different shapes of scales. Once I had all of my foam cut, I pieced them together alongside one of the chipboard covers to ensure I had enough. The next step is to cover the chipboard covers and make them look a little nicer. Cut two 12 by 12 pieces of cardstock in the color of your choice, I used black, to 7 by 10 inches for the outside. Mark one side of the cardstock at 3/4 inches around all sides to indicate the center where the chipboard will be placed. Apply glue to one side of the chipboard. I used wood glue, but any PVA glue should work fine. One day I'll invest in some fancy bookbinding PVA glue, but until then, wood glue, tacky glue, or Mod Podge for this girl. Stick the chipboard to the cardstock inside the marks you made. Trim the corners about 1/8 of an inch from the corners of the chipboard. Apply glue to the edges and fold the edges over the back side of the chipboard. Do this for all 4 sides. For the inside of the covers, cut another piece of cardstock, I used red, to 5 by 8 inches. Apply some more glue to this sheet and stick it to the inside cover, being careful to place it in the center. Put the covers under something heavy and leave them to dry. I left mine overnight. The next step is to create a template for where you want your stitches to be. I made mine at 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and 5.5, 6.5, and 7.5 inches. Clamp the covers together the way they'd face each other on the book, and clamp the template on the covers, leaving about 1/4 inch at the edge. Punch holes along the marks on the template, 1/4 inch from the edge of the covers. Make sure to place a piece of foam or something underneath to prevent the awl from damaging your furniture. Yay! It's time to glue on the foam scales. I ended up using tacky glue and it actually worked really well. I didn't want to have to use contact cement, which is the best glue for foam to foam, so I experimented to see what would work for this project, and tacky glue worked fine. Apply glue to the top edge of the strip and stick it to the front cover. Alternate the placement of the scales as you go. At first I didn't trim the scales before gluing them down and quickly decided to cut the scale to size before gluing it to the cover. Basically, I would eyeball the placement and trim the edges with my craft knife before applying the glue and sticking the piece down. Keep placing the foam scales until you reach the top of the cover. Then I flipped the book and trimmed off the excess, overhanging the edge of the book. I used some super glue on some of the scales that were sticking up too much for my liking. Woohoo! Another step is done. Cover the cover with baking paper and something heavy and leave it to dry overnight. The next day, I painted the cover. But first I made sure the cover was in tip-top shape. I trimmed the edges a little bit more and sanded them a little to smooth out any rough spots, and poked through the cover holes once more with the awl to go through the foam as well. I started my paint job by brushing on 2 coats of paper Mod Podge. Why paper Mod Podge, you ask? Because that's all I had. This will act as a primer and sealer for the foam. I used red, blue, and gold paint for this project. Mix the red and blue to make a deep purple. And slop that all over the cover. Brush that nicely onto the cover. Make sure you get into all the nooks and crannies. I only needed 1 coat to cover the book, and I dried it with a heat gun set on low between coats. Next, take some of the red paint in a dry brush the red all over the cover, taking care to blend the red in as much as possible. Isn't she pretty? For the gold, I used a fan brush, which I've never used before, so that was fun. Apply the gold as a highlight over the edge of the scales with a dry brush. I used very little paint for this, and at times worried I had ruined the whole thing. In the end, I was super happy with how it turned out, and I like how the fan brush created lines on the scales that made them look like they had ridges. Finally, I went over the whole thing with a wash of black paint. My hope was that it would create some more depth to the scales, and honestly, I'm not sure it did anything. But this is probably because my painting skill level is about a 2. Ooh, ah. Okay, friends, we've reached the last step, the binding. Make as many signatures as you like by folding 8.5 by 11 inch paper in half and stacking around 4 pages together. I made 10 signatures of 4 pages each. Use your template clamped to the signatures to mark where the holes will be using a straight edge and a pencil. Then punch holes in the marks using an awl, unfold 1 signature at a time and poke holes at the marks on the spine. We are going to use a Coptic stitch binding method. To stitch everything together, use some wax thread the length of your book times as many signatures you have plus 1. Thread a curved needle. You don't need a curved needle, it just makes it easier. Taking the cover and the first signature, sew through the first hole of the first signature from the inside, leaving a 3-inch tail. Sew through the inside to the outside of the cover. Sew back into the signature through the first hole. Sew to the second hole and through it. Go through the second hole of the cover from the inside to the outside and back into the second hole. Continue doing this to the end, and when you sew back into the last hole, tie a knot on the inside. Sew back out that last hole of the first signature. Pick up the next signature and sew into the corresponding hole on the second signature. Sew to the next hole on this signature and out through that hole. Sew around the two cover threads between the cover and the first signature. Sew back into the second signature through the same hole you came out of. Continue until you reach the end. Sew around the stitches between the cover and the first signature. Pick up a new signature and sew into the first hole. Sew to the next hole and through it. Sew under the two threads between the first and second signature. Sew back into the second hole again. If you need further instruction, I'd be happy to do a Coptic stitch binding tutorial separate in its own video. I'll link my last video in the cards above, where I also did a Coptic stitch binding and I explain this process a little bit more. To add the cover, go through the first hole of the cover from the inside to the outside. Sew under the stitches between the second last and last signature. Sew back into the first hole of the last signature. Sew out of the second hole and through the second cover hole from the inside to the outside. Sew under the two threads between the 9th and 10th signatures and back through the second hole of the 10th signature. Continue until you reach the end and you've sewn through all the cover holes. Sew out the last hole through the cover, under the last stitch between the last two signatures, and back into the last signature through the last hole. Tie a double knot on the inside. And tuck in the end. Then cut the thread. Flip your book back to the first signature and tie off the end with a double knot. And cut the thread. Ta-da! One dragon scale book for all of your adventures or just to show off to your friends. My name is Pam and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe so we can hang out next time. Until then, have an amazing day and we'll see you later. As with most things in life, this crafting project did not go as planned. As some of you may know, I'm participating in National Novel Writing Month this year, and I wanted to make a map to visualize my story better. And since I didn't want this video to just be another map, I thought it would be fun to somehow back the map with leather. Cool. Sounds easy enough. I borrowed some thin 1 to 2 ounce leather from my husband's stash and set to work cutting out a piece that was large enough to fit over the backside of some large watercolor sheets that I had dyed for a previous project. I wanted to use one of these sheets to draw my map on. Cutting out the leather was easy enough. I measured the piece to be about 1 inch wider than my sheet of paper, around 3 of the edges, and added about 6 inches of length to one end. To be honest, the additional 6 inches was just for aesthetic purposes, but I also thought it would help keep the paper on the leather when you rolled it up in case the paper decided to slide as you were rolling it. Next step was to dye the leather. I am not an expert, so please do not take any of this as gospel. My husband was my leather resource for this project. If you do want some great leather tutorials, check out Kit's videos over on Skilltree. That is if you don't follow him already. If you are looking for leather projects for LARP or cosplay, I would definitely recommend that you check out his channel. I used some leather dye in this shade Saddle Tan. I wet the leather and applied the dye in a couple of directions to prevent streaking. Then I thought it'd be fun, nay, a great idea, to dye the backside of the leather. The basic idea behind this was that when I had the map roll open, the backside of the leather would not appear to be unfinished. I'm just going to cut to the chase here. I screwed up. Yep, I'll admit it. The dye unfortunately bled through the leather in a couple of spots, probably because of the thickness of the leather. But you know when you get wet spots on drywall? Yeah, it looked a little bit like hot garbage. If hot garbage looked like wet spots on drywall. The best part of this was my husband telling me that leather dye is very forgiving. That's what I'm going to say in my video. It's very forgiving.
There you go.
Justin said so. Well, that's just because it hadn't met me yet. At this point, I honestly didn't know what to do because my last brain cell had jumped ship earlier in the day, and I really didn't want to start over, despite my husband telling me that he would just use the ruined leather for another project. So I left it. And then it came to me, Eureka! I would use the ruined piece of leather, but I would need to pivot. I decided to make what can only be described as a giant leather envelope. Then I could store my map inside of it and roll it up to make some sort of kind of map case. Something map case adjacent. With a new plan in place and more brain cells accumulated, I set to work cutting yet another piece of leather. This piece will be the same size as the one I cut previously, but only dyed on one side. Once dyed, I applied some neat's foot oil to the surface of the leather to prevent it from drying out. And then buffed the surface. This is supposed to help blend the dye together. I finished by applying some Resolene to help protect the leather. I then left this piece to dry under a weight. I used my glass cutting mat as a weight to cover the entire surface and help it dry flat. This was an additional issue to the first piece that I had cut. Then I got to work on my map. I'll be the first to admit that I am not an artist, so if you ever feel like you can't draw anything, don't worry about it. Neither can I. I sketched out the basic concept ahead of time and then transferred some of that design to my pre-stained paper. The setting of my story is on a hillside city where the buildings begin at the harbor and then go up towards a grand palace, sort of built on these meandering roads that travel up towards the palace. My thought was that this map was sketched by a spy from a neighboring nation and was going to be used in an assassination plot. The map was then smuggled to another operative who keeps it stored in his map case adjacent leather envelope. Yeah, that sounds realistic enough. And no, that is not what my story is about, just a tiny snippet of a detail. My tale is about a barmaid. Yep. I cut the offending part off my original piece of leather and then trimmed up the edges so they were roughly the same width. I then burnished the backside of the larger piece instead of dyeing it. I used gum tragacanth and a bone folder to flatten the backside of the leather. I then glued the edges of the two pieces together with leather glue and left an opening at one end. This was probably my least favorite part. I struggled to get such large pieces lined up without making a mess. In the end though, I did manage to get them somewhat glued together. Passing grade for me. C+. Yay. I may be wrong, but this appears to just hold the pieces together so then you can stitch it afterwards. I then marked the stitch line around the three edges using a wing divider. And then punched holes around the three edges using that line as a guide. I then used saddle stitch to sew the three edges together. I probably enjoyed this part the best. I don't mind stitching, it's labor intensive and repetitive, but throw on a podcast or something or some music while you're doing it, and it is one of the most meditative and relaxing, stress reducing crafts things that you can do. Once stitched up, I added a couple of grommets to the flap end of the map case adjacent envelope. This way I could run some leather cording through the holes and use the cord to keep the pouch rolled up. The leather cording was not the color that I wanted, but was all that we had on hand at the time. But once it was all finished, I really don't mind the contrast of the colors. I did take some time to hammer my stitches flat and burnish the edges of the leather to give my project a more finished look. These were suggestions from my house project QA manager, whose eye for detail overrules my need for having a project completed. If you're ever wondering if you did a good job making something, find yourself a craft QA person. But be warned, they don't always give you the passing grade you want. I have to say, I actually really love how this map case envelope thing turned out. And it would be cool to add a strap or something so that it could be carried. It would be easy enough to slip a belt through the middle part of the rolled up envelope and sling it over your back or shoulder so that you can carry it around. But what about my map? If only I could snap my fingers and have that done. Thanks so much for watching. My name is Pam and this is Total Pamarchy, the craft channel with a little anarchy. Until next time, bye. Let's make a dice tray. That's gonna bruise. Have you ever been rolling your dice and have it go flying off the table, ruining that perfectly good roll? Well, I think I may have the perfect solution. I mean, we already know what the solution is. You just roll your dice in a box or something. But boxes are boring. But also I want to make this dice rolling tray a place where you can also store your dice. So if you happen to be traveling for your D&D session or gaming session or whatnot, and you need a place to carry your dice but also roll your dice, why not have it all self-contained in one unit? I will be making this out of leather. I am going to do a mock-up using some craft foam. And then hopefully I can have what's in my head come out and be transferred on the craft foam. And I'm also going to try to not fall off my chair again. At any rate, let's start the crafting montage! We have our prototype. So basically, we have a square. Simple? Yes. And then we have this bit here that is going to act like a little dice pouch. Yes, yes, yes. And then this whole thing will be able to unfurl and then roll up into a tube. So then you can take it wherever you need to go to play D&D. And now we craft. Oh, I'm dizzy. Whew. Yep. First thing that we are going to do is take our chunk of leather and cut out our pieces. Well, they're particles. When you think of it as just dead skin, it's kind of gross, but. The leather that I'm using is a ounce leather. It is approximately 2 millimeters thick. If that's correct, this should fold up and in and be sewn in there and there. And then that rolls over like that. Now that we have all of our pieces cut out and we didn't mess it up, which is great, I'll throw the measurements of these up on the screen so you can see what they are. These straps here are about 2 centimeters by 9 inches. That was a lovely mix of metric and imperial for you. Welcome to Canada. 3/4 of an inch by 9 inches. Approximately. You may want to measure and see how long you need yours to be. This square is 10 by 10. This piece here is a combination of checks notes. This width here was 9 3/4, so from end to end or from side to side was 9 3/4. This is 6 3/4, and this is 6 3/4 here. And then this is about 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches off the end, approximately, because you lose some of your length when you fold it up because of the width of the leather. So you may want to play around with it just to make sure that you're measuring and cutting correctly. Overall, you'll need a piece of leather that's about 17 by 10 inches plus straps. So if you have a chunk that you can get nice clean edges, that's about 20 by 10, then you should be good to make one of these, barring any mistakes. And now it's time to dye. The color I have chosen for this elaborate dice tray is jade. So it's going to be whatever color that is when it's applied to the leather. We have our leather pieces now cut out and dyed. I have spent the time and buffed them and burnished the edges, just doing a couple of finishing touches to them. And then I've started to sort of pre-fold them to get them to form into the direction that I want them to go. And I was trying to figure out where I was going to put the snaps on the tray, because in order to have this sort of the sides to fold up and turn into a tray, I'm going to put snaps in here, so you just have to snap it together and then unsnap it, and then eventually it'll roll up into a roll that you can just take with you. So I've made sort of a template that's going to help guide me to punch some of these holes in the same location around the outer edge of the mat. And I sort of test fit it a little bit just by folding it in and then holding this piece in on the inside to make sure that everything was sort of fitting before I go on to the next step. We're at the send out your prayers to the craft gods for me, and let's hope this works out, because this is the exact part where something could go really, really wrong. Snaps terrify me. You have 4 pieces and you have to have them arranged the correct way. And I just know I'm gonna mess it up. It's snapping time! Snap. 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 I'm really excited about this. I was really worried I was gonna mess this up. The other way that you could do this without using snaps is do a similar thing, but use those little Sam Brown buttons. I've also seen people stitch through the top, which if you're not wanting to take it apart and roll it up and you just wanna have a tray, you could just stitch around the edge. I'm excited that works, woo! You could stop here, or you could move on and do what I'm going to do and make a little pouch for your dice to go into. So the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to take our little pouch template here, and then we are going to fold these edges in and sew them onto here and here on the sides, like so. And then this top part can fold over. So let's get to sewing.
I'm really excited about this. Yay! So I think my next course of action is to get this situated inside here and attach some additional snaps just to its outer edge so that it can snap into the side here, or put snaps on this outer edge. That is the question. By the time this video goes out, you will know what my decision is.
The next day.
I decided while I was working on this green tray and bag, I felt like rather than making one that was a certain way and not knowing whether that was going to be the way that was going to be the best way or not, unless I actually tested it or not, I decided that it would be easy enough just to whip up another one. Again, I'm at that 95% done. My issue when I was about to finish this green one yesterday was the fact that I didn't really know if I wanted to connect it or not. And then so I left it thinking that would give me longer to like kind of figure it out. And still I'm sitting here at the same state I was going, now what? So these two trays are going to be very, very similar. This green one, I am going to attach this pouch so the snaps are on the outside edge here. This other one, I'm going to attach the snaps to the outside of the bag, so this could be a separate bag. All we need to do is attach the snaps to these little bags, little pouches, and attach snaps to these so that they are on the mats. Let's finish this project. I'm so freaking excited that this turned out. Like, oh my god. Now onto the crepe. Guess what? They're finished! These have to be one of the coolest things I have ever made. And if you don't know, I have another YouTube channel called Total Pamerky. I'm taking a break from it to work on things for Hollow Gross, which are a little bit more in a specific direction. And this channel has been very calming for me mentally. And it's projects like these that just make me feel really good, and that's what I wanted to start making, was projects that make me feel good. Fill your cup up with stuff that brings you joy and makes you happy and makes you feel fulfilled. If you're looking for more of a beginner-friendly D&D dice-related project, then I suggest you check out this video next. In that video, I show you how to make a couple of versions of bags that can be used as dice bags. So I definitely recommend that you watch that one. Until next time, happy crafting, friends, and I will see you later. Wow, if you see me sitting here right now at the end of that 2 hours, then holy smoke, you are freaking amazing. Wow, I can't thank you enough for being here and being part of my community. If you have any ideas for future craft projects that you'd like to see, drop me a comment down below, because I read all of my comments, and you never know when your comment may influence one of my future videos.
Thank you so much for being here and being part of my community. Until next time, bye.